famous writers. We are not going to make Stephen King money. We are not going to make J.K. Rowling money. We are barely going to make Dean Koontz's money or anybody else's who is the major top sellers. James Patterson, hell no. No, you ain't touching that. I'm sorry, you are not touching that. I'm not trying to be mean. It's true. You are not going to get there. I'm not going to get there. But if I can make $30,000 a year writing as opposed to, I don't know, doing, well, in construction I'd probably make more, but doing like, minute, benign work like, say, a janitor, and all respect to janitors, I've been one, I understand. But do I rather make money as a writer or do I rather make money as a janitor? Well, if I can make the equal amount of money and survive on it, or barely survive, I don't care if I barely survive, I'd rather write. I'd rather write, and most likely it's the harder job. And it's the scarier job. People will always make a mess. There's job security there, but there might be a time where people don't want print. There might be a time where magazines are going to go out of style. There might be a time where all bloggers are the news, and that is terrifying. But there is always the option, the absolute option of striving to be better. And to do that, you need two major things. You need to get yourself an agent. I recommend people get an agent. If you're going to write books, you don't need an agent for short stories. You don't need an agent for articles. You don't need an agent if you want to work for a magazine as a freelancer. You make really good money as a freelancer. You may not be on staff. I hate to tell you, the joke is, it's sometimes better not to be on staff. Here's the sad fact. Would you rather be published in Cosmopolitan, or would you rather work for Cosmopolitan? Granted, if you publish for Cosmopolitan, you're published in Cosmo. But next week you can go and publish for something else. You can go and get published in, teen magazines. You can go and get published in OK Magazine. You can go and get published somewhere else. You're not on staff. On staff, you're getting paid annual salary, which is getting slimmer and slimmer by the day. I'd rather take the $35 per day. Say I do an article a day. Say I'm so good I get an article a day. I'm getting paid $35 a day. Do the math. If I get paid $50 for one article and I get paid $100 for another article, I get paid $125 for the highest article for that week, and I am constantly getting published every other month. If I can have 10 to 12 articles per month, or I could switch on and off, I could be making about $5,000 to $6,000 a week, or a month, excuse me, if I do nothing but write and bust my ass. It's possible. It's very possible. Lots of freelancers live off nothing but freelancing. I think the highest I ever heard, I'm trying to think, was $120,000 a year just freelancing. And that was a few years ago, so I don't know if that's necessarily true now. I think that's the extreme exception. But you know what? Regardless of it, we'll discuss it some more. But you know what? This is going to be a two-parter. Okay, this is a two-parter, guys. Sorry, because there's so much information to give. So okay, let's say you got your freelance work. That's one way of getting published. Now you got to find the time to do it. If you're good enough, that's all you need to do. Find several topics you're very passionate about. Find things that you're easily able to get into that intrigue you and write about them. Please, forget about it. The children's market is so huge right now. For magazines like Highlights. Highlights is still a very popular... See, we're older, so we don't know this stuff. This is not just common knowledge. Unless you have a child, and not many of us, maybe a little younger than me even, don't have a child. Or they don't give them that. But the majority of Americans and the world have their children reading. You can write short stories for children. And it's not easy. Not by any means. But my point is, the children's market is huge. There's books about it. There is magazines about even just the market alone. There are websites all over the entire internet that discuss how to write for children's markets. So you got children's markets. You got mechanics. Mechanic markets are huge right now. If you know anything about a car, but you've always wanted to write, guess what? You got yourself an ability to write right there. If you have any type of skill, handcrafting, anything, you know anything about painting, you know anything about art, you know anything about literature, there is always a market for you to write in. Use what you know. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD in art to write about art. It doesn't take that. It's actually sometimes better for the commoner to write about it, the layman to speak about it, because a lot of people reading it are laymen. You can write it. It depends on what you're passionate about, and also, more importantly, what you're knowledgeable on. That is a way to break into the market. Now, secondly, you have articles, you have magazine articles, you have freelance work, regardless if it's newspaper, etc., outside of the mainstream. You also have blogging. That is the newest form of media. It is the newest. It may not seem new because it's similar to the old guard, but it is a new form, and there are plenty of blogs out there that will pay you to guest write. And they will, if you have a blog like I do, they will allow you to do tit for tat. You write for them, they pay you, and you can also promote your own blog. I mean, it sounds common sense, but most people don't realize that the markets are so broad that sometimes that's the problem. You have to narrow them down. Nobody's yet to narrow them down because nobody wants to limit your abilities. I think you should limit your abilities. You should limit what you write about. I limit what I write about at this point. I write about video games. I write about media. It's a broad topic. It's very broad in its limitation, but it's still broad. Occasionally I write a fictional story. Occasionally I go outside of the norm and write about something else. But I am also very well versed on topics outside of video games, outside of books, outside of media, outside of television, outside of production of television and art and editing and Final Cut and all Pro Tools and all these other formats and different formats of editing and creating content. I have, though. Don't get me wrong, I am very well adept into those those topics as well. But occasionally I want to talk about maybe, I don't know, something like paranormal based. Maybe I want to talk about something that intrigues me. Maybe I want to talk about sociology, for example. I know a lot about feral children and the history of feral children. I've read many books on the cases of feral and neglected children. I found the topic fascinating that, Mowgli still exists, in this day and age, in the 21st century, especially in Russia. We still see these children who are on the streets being raised by dogs, and they mimic dogs because that's what they have to do to survive. It is unfortunate, it's disgusting, but it's fascinating regardless of the human nature and how disgusting we really are as a creature sometimes. But the point is, I am knowledgeable on so many different things that I can use that to my advantage as a writer. I can use that to my advantage of publication. Doesn't mean I'm going to get published. No, because there's always someone out there that's a better expert, that's a better writer than I am. But the point is, I try, and I have many different vessels to choose from. And I do not have to set them all on fire in order to do so. I do have many different ways, but I do narrow it. You have to be narrow in some ways, or you're never going to get published. And it comes down to it as a point, a case in point, that we are not just writing in order to make money. It's not what you write for. You're writing to get published. You're writing to get some exposure. You're writing to make connections. I want to network with other writers. I want to network with people who want to start a magazine. I want to network with people. I want to be there. Whether the magazines are for or against what I believe, I don't care. I want to write for them. I want to be established. That's why I don't pick party sides. I don't pick religious views. I don't attack certain individuals, and I repeat, I do not put out my personal, honest opinion on anything that I can somewhat get away with. If I have an opinion about, like, say, the New York Giants or the New England Patriots, for example, I'm not going to let that limit me in writing an article about them or writing about them in general or putting out an editorial where I do have where I do show my opinion, but I show the opposing side. It is all about making your availability broad in that regard. Now, The second part is the books. I've talked about this a little bit earlier in the first part of this, but here's the truth. You're probably going to need a good 10 years, and I understand this. I hate the concept of this too. I wish I could be published tomorrow. But to legitimately publish, you're going to need about 10 years or more of, I'd say, education on the subject. You're going to need about 5 to 10 years of actual publishing experience before you can even start to begin to negotiate your terms in books. A lot of people discuss unionizing writers, and I'm against that because I feel that hurts the writer as a creative individual because it makes us a commodity. Now, I could be wrong. This is the only thing I'm very strong about. I'm against unionizing freelance writers. I've always been against it. It doesn't allow me to pick and choose my terms. The fact that if I was unionized,